super common phrase for you today, and I'm going to see if you can guess what the phrase is. So anybody, just shoot it out. It's actually a Bible verse that is misused over and over again, and I'm wondering if we just know it here today. Anybody? Yeah, that's one too. Yes. So, all right, we'll move on. So, what do you guys think of my shirt today? Come on, somebody answer. Come on. What's that? Oh, come on, you can do better than that.
Very plain.
So, very plain, thank you. So, it's functional, right? So, hey, how dare any of you judge me? How dare you judge me? You ever heard that before? You can't judge me. Don't judge me. We're not supposed to judge. In fact, doesn't it say in the Bible, don't judge? In fact, let me take it one step further. Doesn't Jesus himself say, don't judge? Does he? Well, I mean, if you look at the Bible, you would know that, yeah, that's what Jesus says. In fact, let's look at it right here. It says Matthew 7:1. Jesus says, judge not that you be not judged. So, if you've been with us for a while here, we've been walking through the Sermon on the Mount. We've been looking at the words that Jesus said. This is the best sermon that has ever been preached. And Jesus here, as he's getting closer to the end, he says this, judge not that you be not judged. And you may be thinking, well, hang on a second. What does he actually mean by that? And that's really the question that we have to ask is, what does he actually mean? Did Jesus mean that Christians should never say anything about something wrong? Silence. Nobody wants to answer that question. Okay. Did he mean that we should never evaluate someone's actions? Oh, good. So I can do whatever I want? Good. Okay. Did he mean that we should never confront sin? Did he mean that every belief, behavior, lifestyle around simply should be accepted no matter what without discernment? Well, it is 2026, so... Right? And that's really where it comes from, is like, don't you judge me, right? And that's what it comes from, is that often even that judgment is like, I actually feel conviction myself, but don't you dare judge me, right? And Jesus is not saying that we don't judge in these ways. He's actually going to give us the reason why he says these things. It's not just about judging certain behaviors or evaluating, what people do. But he has this interpretation that needs to come. And here's the thing. Jesus tells his followers actually to exercise discernment. In fact, we all make judgments every day, do we not? You made a judgment call. If you're married, you made a judgment on who you married. Right? And if you dated more than one person, you made a judgment that those people maybe not so much. Right? You made a judgment call. Right? Or for your friends, you make a judgment call. I don't want to hang out with this person because this person does whatever you may not like, but then again, you've made a judgment call. We're not told to not be discerning, right? Otherwise, we would have issues with some of Jesus' other verses. In fact, we have this one in Matthew 7:15. It says, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. Now, if you didn't make a judgment call, how would you know? How do we know if someone's a false prophet? Anybody? So here we go. I'm going to make a prophecy for you this year. Okay, here's my prophecy. The Chicago Blackhawks are going to win the Stanley Cup. Now, how would you know if I'm a false prophet? Now watch it. Now watch them win. Right? Yeah. You heard it here first, people. Right? Right? So you know a false prophet by when they say something, it doesn't actually come to pass. It doesn't come true. It doesn't happen. That's a false prophet. But if you don't make a judgment on what they said, because all of you right away made a judgment on me saying that the Chicago Blackhawks are going to win the Stanley Cup. All of you right away. And resounding, no, they're not. Like, are you crazy? Right? But again, judgment was made, right? They might. Unlikely. He continues, you will recognize them by their what? Fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Well, obviously not. So again, he says, you recognize them by their fruits, by what they do, by what they say. This is how we make discernment. This is how we make judgment calls. We recognize people by what they say, by what they do. You need, again, to make judgment calls. So Jesus isn't talking about don't judge those things. And this is where we often get this verse that we're looking at gets completely misused because people think I can just say, don't judge me, and therefore you can't talk to me about any of my sin. You can't talk to me about anything that I've done wrong. You can't talk to me about my shirt. You can't talk to me about my lifestyle. You can't talk to me about anything, because if you do, you're judging me. And that's not what Jesus means. That wouldn't even make any sense. Right? Then we might as well throw half the Bible in the garbage, because there's a lot of things that are said in the Bible about making judgment calls. Right? And then in the end, who is the righteous judge? Well, Jesus is. And if Jesus is telling us not to judge, then how is the righteous judge going to judge if we're not supposed to judge? Wow, that's quite a mouthful. It's like the woodchuck, good chuck, wood, right? So it can't mean then never make moral judgments. Instead, Jesus is confronting the kind of judgment that flows from pride, that flows from self-righteousness, that flows from hypocrisy, right? The do as I say, not as I do. Right? He's starting to call out those who make these judgments, who will call out other people, but they never actually look at themselves. Right? And this is what is going to come to the surface here. This is the major difference here, is that Jesus is focusing on people who condemn, not people who make discerning choices. There's a difference between condemnation and discernment. Big difference. And that's what we're going to be looking at. So what is this difference? What does this look like for us? What are we supposed to be doing? Right? And that's really where we're going to get here. So back to our verse. Right? Judge not that you not be judged. Now this is going to be interesting, because as we get closer to the end of this passage, which is not very long, it's only 6 verses long, this part of the passage, but as we get to the end of it, you're really going to start to understand what he means. In fact, the Greek word, which we've been looking at some of them lately, means, it's fairly broad, and depending on the context, really means to judge, to evaluate, to decide, to distinguish, to pass judgment, to pronounce judgment or condemnation. You're thinking, wait a second, that's the definition? But judgment in itself isn't always automatically sinful, right? We need to see context. Context always matters. Here's John 7:24. Do not judge by appearances, but judge with right judgment. So this was kind of the whole shirt thing. Don't judge by appearances, but instead judge with right judgment. We shouldn't just look at somebody and when we see that person right away make a judgment. In fact, we should make right judgment. We should know something about them, their character, again, the fruits, everything that happens. We shouldn't just look at someone and right away judge them based on how they look. Now, how many of us are guilty of this? Right? Yeah. I mean, most of us are, right? There's certain things that I see and I'm like, ugh, right? And we all do that. But here we're told that we're supposed to make right judgment, but right judgment isn't based on how somebody looks. And I'm kind of glad about that, because I don't even like looking at myself in the mirror, so it's good. But we're told to not judge wrongly, but to judge rightly. Jesus isn't commanding some sort of moral blindness here that we don't make right judgments. No, he's saying make right judgments, but make sure that they are right. So what judging is not, biblically judging is not necessarily recognizing sin as sin. Like it's not, we can recognize sin as sin, right? We're told to make those judgment calls. We're given commands, right? God has revealed moral truth to us that we're supposed to follow, right? In fact, we see this in Galatians 6:1. Brothers, if anyone is caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him, but in a spirit of gentleness. Right? So here's where things get really interesting. Notice the goal here. Right? You catch somebody in a transgression. You catch somebody in sin. You hear something. You confront somebody on something in their life that they've been doing. But what's the goal? For some of us, is the goal to just embarrass them? I see that sin and I don't really like that person. And here's my chance. I can embarrass them. I can drag this before everybody. What an opportunity. Right? That's not the motive. Right? That's not the motive at all. Or maybe it's to destroy them. Hey, here's my opportunity. Right? I can totally destroy this person completely. Now that they've caught in this sin, I can completely destroy their life. This is going to be awesome. Or maybe you just want to humiliate them just a little bit. But what's the goal? Yeah, right here. Restore. Restoration. The goal of this judgment is restoration, right? That's the whole point. 1 Corinthians 5:12. This is, of course, Paul talking about, for what do I have to do with judging those outside the church? Are you not to judge those inside? So this is interesting, is that Paul is talking about judging those within the church. Now, why would Paul make this differentiation between those who are outside the church and those who are inside the church? Seems a little funky, doesn't it? Well, if you don't claim to follow Jesus, why should I expect you to do the things of Jesus? Kind of makes sense, doesn't it? However, if you come here and you claim to follow Jesus, now there's a judgment call. Because you have claimed to follow Jesus, you're doing something now that doesn't follow that. Now we have that conversation. But I think the biggest problem, and this is where people get their hang-ups with the church, is that people approach not in the restoration moment, but they're like, oh, caught ya. And then people walk away from the church. Because the goal isn't restoration. The goal is condemnation. I mean, you're terrible. How can you even come to church? What's wrong with you? What are you doing here? And of course, all of you now want to come back next week, right? Like, of course not. Because there's no restoration there. God is a God of reconciliation, restoration. That's the whole point. That's the gospel in a nutshell. And here we go then being like, oh, well, we got you, so bye. It's not how we should function. And maybe some of you have experienced that. Maybe even some of you in this church haven't experienced that. And if you have, I'm sorry. That should never be the goal. And if it was me, I'm definitely sorry. And come tell me afterwards, because I would rather have restoration, right? Preparing for this message has been one of the hardest messages I've had to prepare for. Because the whole point, and we're going to get to this later, is I had to look within myself before I actually spoke it. Right? And we're going to get to that part about looking at ourselves before we look at other people. Right? That's why this is, sitting on the stage right here. Right? You may have heard about the whole log spec thing. Yeah, we're going to get there. Right? So what is sinful judging then? It's condemnation without compassion. You show no compassion. I want you to fall. I want you to fail. I don't want to restore you at all. Right? It's just criticizing without actually looking within. Right? Finding everything critical about everybody else, but I'm not going to look inside and see myself, right? I'm not going to do that. It's finding faults in other people, because when I do that, it makes me feel more superior. And this is what the religious leaders were great at. It's like, I'm going to find all the things that are wrong with you, because when I find all the things that are wrong with you, then I can feel like I'm on the high ground and I'm superior, and you guys are just down here. I like it that our stage isn't super tall. I've been to some churches where the stage is like up here, and you're preaching like you're just above everybody. And this helps, like, so you can see me, but I hate it that it's even like there's that idea of like, oh, I'm above you guys. I want to state clearly, the pastor isn't above anybody in the church, right? When it comes to like the authority of the church, yes, you have your pastors and your elders are leaders of the church, but we're not above anybody, right? You need to understand that. Right? That's part of it. Is it holding other people to standards that you don't apply to yourself? You ever done that? Right? That's the rules for thee, but not for me. Right? Politicians never do that. Did I say that out loud? Sorry, that's supposed to be a quiet part. It's in the notes here. Treating someone's failure as their identity. Right? Where that becomes who they are. Because we've seen what they did then we just label that person. That's what they're always going to be, and they're never going to be anything different. Right? This is all wrongful judging. This is when it becomes sinful. Right? This is the problem. And here's the thing that Jesus gets to. He says, for with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it'll be measured to you. He says, careful how you judge. Because how you judge other people, that's how I'm going to judge you. And here's the interesting thing. If you're anything like me, When it's other people, yes, God, bring your justice, bring your judgment. But when it's me, what do I say? Oh, grace, mercy, bring graciousness, please. Right? And again, this is the problem. Jesus saying, hey, if you want to go and you want to judge other people, then that same ruler that you use to judge other people, I'm going to use that on you and see how you like it. All of a sudden, it flips things. Jesus introduces this picture then of a measuring standard, right? And it's like carrying a ruler to everybody and be like, you meet the standard, you're okay. You're not quite there, right? And unfortunately, some of us live our lives that way, that we carry around the ruler, comparing ourselves to everybody else. And Jesus is like, hey, try comparing yourself to me. Because those other people aren't the standard. And that's the problem. We try and make them the standard. We say, oh man, like that person's not good enough. That person's not spiritual enough. That person's not mature enough. Da 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 da. Yeah, and neither are you. Right? I think we could all use a little bit more spirituality. I think we could all use a little bit more maturity. I think all of us know that. But we find things like, oh, they shouldn't have said that. They shouldn't dress like that. They shouldn't raise their kids like that. They should know better. They should serve more. They should pray more. They should read their Bible more. They should be more disciplined. Da, 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 da. We could go on forever. They should come to church more. Right? Really, when anybody shows up here anytime, we're just happy you're here. I don't care if it's been last week you were here, if it's 6 weeks you've been here, if it's 6 months ago that you were here. We're happy you're here. And I hope that you never feel judged coming in the door if it has been months and months later, because that's not the goal. We've all been there. Before I came back into ministry, I think I was about 8 months without going to church. And then I showed back up at church. And oddly enough, I was greeted poorly the first time I came back. And it's funny because it was actually meant to be a joke, what was said, but it didn't turn out to be much of a joke. Right? It's amazing how even being like, oh yeah, you must be new here. We can say things like that that might seem casual, might seem joking, but it can feel like a pretty harsh judgment pretty fast. So we want you to all know, like, yeah, we want you here every week. Don't hear me wrong. We love having you here, but if you miss a week, 2, 3, 6 months, you come back here, we're happy to have you. Right? We're always happy to have you. And I hope that's the feeling you get. And if it's not, just, tell me who it was that made you feel that way and we'll drop kick them. No, man. Right? But the biggest problem in all of this is that we're saying they should be more like me. They should be more like me. I didn't even want to put that line in here because I know I do it. Man, I wish some people in the church served more. They should be more like me. Oh, crap. Oops. Like, somebody else should be preaching this message and I should be sitting with you right now. And man, was I convicted going through all of this stuff because I'm like, how often do I do that? They should be more like me. And it should be, I should be more like Jesus. Right? Completely getting it wrong. And Jesus says, be careful with the ruler you use. Right? Do you ever notice how we have this faulty ruler though? When somebody else loses their temper, right? It's like, oh man, that person has anger problems. But when I lose my temper, it was a bad day. Notice the difference in the ruler and the standards? You ever do that before? We find excuses. When somebody else forgets something, they're irresponsible. But when I forget something, oh man, I had a lot on my mind. Notice the difference in the ruler? Right? It's kind of crazy how we do this, right? Or if somebody else speaks harshly, they're super rude, but if I speak harshly, oh man, people have just been getting on my nerves all day and it just came out. The ruler is different. We got to be careful with the ruler we use. And Jesus is saying, hey, the ruler is the same for everybody. We judge others based on their actions and the things that they do. That's how all of us are to be judged. There is no difference in the standard. And of course, Jesus says this. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Now, the speck that Jesus is talking about, actually, when you convert it, is meaning like a small piece of sawdust. This is my speck because I wanted you to be able to see it. This is bigger than a piece of sawdust. This in the eye would be very uncomfortable. However, this in the eye would be super uncomfortable. Right? Now, can you imagine this? This is ridiculous. And this is what Jesus was getting at. It's actually talking about a log or a timber. So a log, this was a small log. I had bigger logs, but I didn't want to hold them. And I've been walking a lot because I want to trim down a bit. So I wanted to carry the big log, but I'm not walking all the way to the church with this big log. So I brought a smaller log. Anyways, the point of the matter is, the point of the matter is, how can I even see a speck in your eye if this is here? How do I see anything if this is in my eye? I can't see anything, and that's really the point that's being made here, right? You can't see anything. How can you then go to somebody else and be like, you know what, guys, you have something in your eye. Just thought I'd let you know. And you're all looking at me like, are you stupid? Do you not see? Right? It seems really weird. And that's the whole point. But here's the issue, is often what we want to do is we want to take a magnifying glass to everybody else. And I wanted to bring a magnifying glass, but man, you can't find those things anymore. Does anybody actually have a magnifying glass at home? Anybody? Yes, I knew I should have talked to you, Gina. 3 of them. See, I should have talked to you. You got one too?
My kids love them.
Yes, see? There you go. So there's a few people that have magnifying glasses. But the point of the matter is, instead of having a magnifying glass, really we should have a mirror. Right? To reflect on, okay, what's going on in my own life first before I try and do something for anybody else, right? And that's really what Jesus is getting at. Is first examine yourself, then deal honestly with your own sin, and then you can help somebody else out with what's going on in their lives, right? And that's the whole point, right? So, he continues. He says, how can you say to your brother, let me take that speck out of your eye, when there is a log in your own eye? I mean, good point, Jesus, right? How can you do that? And that's what we just talked about. He says, you hypocrite. First take the log out of your own eye, and then you'll see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Right? This is the whole point. We don't want to be hypocrites. But if we claim to follow Jesus and we're going after somebody else and we're getting on their case about the sin that's in their life, and they can very easily turn back and say, hey, what about the stuff in your life? Now, let's not get this wrong though. Because some of us want to use that as the instant, this is what's going to repel them. It's well, what about the sin in your life? Yeah, we all have sin in our life, but I would encourage you when you are confronted to actually deal with the stuff that's going on in your own life as well. Instead of right away be like, what about the stuff in your life? But if we are going to confront people, we better make sure we look in the mirror before we take a magnifying glass to somebody else. Right? And that's the point that Jesus is saying here. Do you want to be a hypocrite? Where you tell somebody, hey, you shouldn't be doing this, but yet you are doing the same thing, right? That's a problem. And this is what Jesus is warning about us. But the question is, why is it so easy to see other people sin? Right? And that's really where this all comes from, is why is it so easy for me to see other people sin, but so difficult for me to see my own? Why is that? Big part of it is pride. Big part is I don't even want to. Yes. Who wants to, right? You want a dangerous prayer? Here's one. Psalm 139:23. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there is any way in me that's wicked, and lead me in the way everlasting. Try praying this prayer. Search my heart and try me. Know my thoughts. Right? A lot of people don't know what's going on inside here. For me, it's not a whole lot. But a lot of people, right, they don't know what's going on inside your head. But David even prays, search my thoughts. See if there's anything wrong with me. And this should be our prayer before we approach anybody else. Search me, God. Search my thoughts. Search my life. Search my actions. Search what's going on in my own life before I go and I address anybody else, right? We see the same thing here in Lamentations. Let us trust and examine our ways and return to the Lord. It's saying, hey, let's examine our ways and return to the Lord before we encourage anybody else to do the same thing. Let's examine what's going on in our own lives, and then we can go and we can ask other people too, hey, you're doing this, it's moving you away from the Lord. You should, we need to stop that so we can come back to the Lord. And that's what restoration is about, is that we genuinely care about the other person and we want them to come back to walking with Christ. We're not approaching them because we want them to fail, because we want them to fall, because we want to humiliate them, any of that stuff. We're doing it because we genuinely want to see them restored because we love them. That's the reason. Right? Jesus doesn't say never judge, but he does say judge rightly. And that's really the point we're getting at, right? Here it is, right? The whole do not judge by appearances, but judge with right judgment, right? He doesn't say never judge, but make sure that it is a right judgment. Biblical discernment asks, what has God said? Now remember, when we go back to the very first sin in the very beginning, that was the question. Well, did God really say? Where we need to know what God said. If you want proper discernment, it's like what God has said should be how we discern, how we make those judgments. Where sinful judgments ask, how can I make myself look better or more superior to other people? That's the difference. That's the contrast. It should always be asking instead, what does God want? What does God want for me? What does God want for them? Not, how does this make me look better? How does this make them look worse? That's not a restoration idea at all, right? Biblical discernment wants restoration, where sinful judgment just wants exposure, right? And there's a big difference between the two. Galatians 6, we just looked at this, shows us what it's about, right? If anyone's caught in transgression, you who are spiritual. Now notice what it says here. You who are spiritual. You who are walking with Jesus. You who have examined your own life. You who are willing to pray the dangerous Psalm 139 prayer. Those of you who are walking with Christ, it's you then who should approach these people with the object of restoring them in a spirit of gentleness. Because if we're not gentle, people get hurt really fast. And I'll be honest with you, I am the most gentle person on the planet. Don't judge me! Right? Gentleness is not my strong suit. Right? I kind of had the same motif with my kids that my parents had with my kids. Like, you're alright, get up, you're fine, like, carry on. Gentleness is not my strong suit, but if we're going to be people that are going to restore people in transgressions, we need to not just be spiritual, we need to be gentle. Right? And again, I would say to some of you who we've had some conversations with and my gentleness has not come out, I'm sorry. And that's something that I definitely know that God is doing the work in me to make me more gentle so that restoration is something that happens more. Right? So verses 1 through 5 in Matthew warn us against judgmentalism, and verse 6 actually warns us or tells us about discernment. It says this, do not give what is holy to dogs, right? Neither throw your pearls before pigs, lest they trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. And you may be thinking like, Jesus, where are you going, man? Like, we were on this log and spec thing and judgmentalism, and now you're talking about throwing stuff that's holy to dogs and pearls before pigs. Now, why does Jesus use dogs and pigs? Back in those days, these are the two animals that you did not want to have anything to do with. Right? These are not holy creatures. Right? So he's like, hey, he's talking about, though, making proper discernment here. Right? Because there's going to be times where you bring something before someone, you came, you examined yourself, you came with a spirit of gentleness, you said the things that needed to be said, and they're just like, get lost. Right? Get out of here. Take off. What's wrong with you? Leave me alone. Right? Sometimes people's response is not going to be great. Sometimes people's responses are poor. And here's a couple things that we say. Jesus says in Matthew 10:14, and if anyone will not receive you or hear your words, shake off the dust from your feet and leave that house. Right? It's sometimes you got to let it be what it's going to be. That's making a discernment. He's like, sometimes you bring the things that are right, you've done all the steps the right way, and yet that person still, doesn't want to receive it. We see the same thing here in Proverbs 9:8. Do not rebuke a scoffer, or he will hate you, but rebuke a wise man, and he'll love you. Right? Those of us who want to walk with Christ, when we're called out on things that we know are wrong, if we're wise, we want to fix those. We want to grow. We want to change. But a scoffer, he'll just hate you. Sometimes that's going to be the end to it. Sometimes people aren't going to respond to correction in the right way. But don't be judgmental still, but use discernment, and sometimes that discernment means, I've given them grace and wisdom, now I got to walk away. So what about judge not in church discipline? We haven't had to do this much, but Matthew 18:15 says, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you've gained a brother, right? This is how things are supposed to be done. If you have a problem with someone, you go to that person and, you tell them the issue and you work it out, and that's what it's supposed to be about. And this is proper correction. This isn't go and tell 6 of your friends. This isn't going and spreading it to everybody else. It's not how it's supposed to work, right? The goal is if they listens to you, then you've gained a brother. You've had restoration, right? And we saw that Paul actually does command judgment within the church. We saw that. We talked about this, right? In 1 Corinthians 5:12, we already talked about that, right? And that as we are part of the body, as we are a family together here, this should be part of our context, that you showing up here and you wanting to be a part of this body means that you're saying, hey, I want to live this way, I want to follow Jesus, and I'm giving you permission to speak truth into my life. And of course, we're going to get to Ephesians 4, where it talks about speaking the truth in love. We don't just smack people upside the face with it, but there's a way to do it, right? And Paul here is dealing with unrepentant people within the church, people that say, hey, I don't need to change. I don't need to do anything different. I'm perfectly fine the way I am. And we all know that all of us here in this room are not perfectly fine the way we are. Right? In fact, that should be who church is for. None of us here are perfectly fine the way that we are. Not a single one of us. Right? We should know that. But he's saying we need loving accountability because we know that sin destroys, right? And this is what we see in Hebrews 3:13. But encourage one another every day, as long as it is called the day, that none of you may be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. This is what unrepentant sin does to us. It hardens our heart. And it makes us live in this state of hostility and anger and resentment and shame and guilt. And the whole reason why we want restoration is we don't want people to live in that aspect of deceitfulness of sin. Sometimes loving someone means warning them, right? It means making sure that they're okay and helping lovingly restoring them, right? So in John 1:14 says this, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, glory as the only Son from the Father, full of two things, grace and truth. And these are the two things when we approach somebody, we need both these things. Jesus exemplified both of them perfectly. He was full of grace, he was full of truth. And when we approach people then, we need to be able to do it in grace and truth, right? This is James 4:11. It says, do not speak evil against one another, brothers. The one who speaks against a brother or judges his brother speaks evil against the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, you are not a doer of the law, but a judge. He continues, there is only one lawgiver and judge, he who is able to save and to destroy. But who are you to judge your neighbor? Right? Jesus is the one true righteous judge. And this puts us in our places that I am not the judge. And I know that often I want to be the judge because, if I was the judge, then everything would be done perfectly right and everybody would be in line, right? And I think a lot of us think that if I was the judge, then everything would be good. But that's not true. We know that because we also know this verse. This is one of the most memorized Bible verses, say for John 3:16, in all the Bible. In fact, this was one of our memory verses when I spoke at camp this year, but it's for all of sin and fall short of the glory of God. None of us can be that righteous judge because all of us have sinned. All of us fall short of the glory of God. Right? We're all in the same boat together. Right? Take the old red-green, right? We're all in this together. I'm pulling for you. That's what this is. There aren't two groups, good people and bad people. There are just sinners who desperately need grace. And then there's sinners who have received grace. It's not an us versus them mentality either, right? And often that's when we look at people that haven't come to Christ yet. It's like, those outsiders. No, it's people that have received grace and people that are still desperately in need of grace. And that's the hope, that they would be restored with Christ as well, right? So, here's our last verse. And one that we really need to think about. It says this, rather speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ. When we speak the truth to one another, when we confront one another, it needs to be done in love. Truth matters and love matters, and Jesus calls us to both, right? This is kind of the whole point. We need to be people that can graciously and gently, with love, speak truth into other people's lives, as we examine ourselves. So that we're not going in as hypocrites, we're not going in with the log in our own eye, but we're going in with the sole goal of restoration, not judgment. Right? Not condemnation. Right? And I think that's where it all needs to start, is that it starts with our own pride, being like, God, I need to know what's going on within here first, before I deal with anybody else. So this is where we want God to give us clear eyes, to give us a humble heart, to give us discernment. And that's my prayer for all of you. And my hope is now that you will not be misusing Matthew 7:1 ever again. Right? Watch, I'll hear the foyer later, don't judge me. There's a difference between condemnation and discernment. Let's be people that are discerning. Let's be people that are about restoration. Let's be people that can graciously, lovingly, and gently restore people back if they're walking away from Christ. Let me pray for you. Lord Jesus, I thank you for today, and I just thank you that you are full of grace and truth, that you are the epitome of love and gentleness. And God, I just pray that we would all get a little bit more of that. That you would help us to love one another better, that you would help us to be more gentle in our responses, that you would help us to be people that are full of grace, but also full of truth. And God, I pray that you would help us to be humble, that we are not the judge. That you would help us to just lovingly restore one another, that you'd help us to walk with you. And God, we thank you for your words, even your hard words. We thank you for them, and we thank you for the change in our own hearts and minds that they do. We thank you for your conviction. And God, I pray that we'd be able to pray that prayer as well, that you would search our hearts, that you would search our minds, see if there's anything in there that shouldn't be. And then help us to walk with you. And then we pray these things in Jesus' name.